The cost of IT in business can be staggering. From hardware and software expenses to services like internet and phone, you don't need to spend a fortune on IT to succeed. If your organization spends more than $500 monthly on any service, or you're considering signing a long-term contract, IT Enabled can help you manage your technology and minimize your costs. Contact us today to schedule a free consultation. IT Enabled, we're here to help.
Hi, I'm Tara Watson-Watkins, President and CEO of the Lufkin, Angelina County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Connect podcast, connecting business to the community. I'm here today with my co-host, Blake Pollino with BP Media Group.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for listening again this week. This week we have Ashley Cook of Harold's House on for an extremely insightful episode, an amazing advocacy group that we have here in our community that helps children and families. So it's super informative. So let's get into that now.
We're thrilled to have Ashley Cook. Ashley and I have known each other for many, many years. But in this role, Ashley is with Harold's House. So welcome. We're glad to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I knew you in previous lives from the newspaper and as a chaplain at the hospital. But you've been with Harold's House how long now?
10 years.
Has it really been 10 years?
Yes,
Wow.
10 years.
That's great. So why don't you tell about kind of your background history, how you got to Harold's House, and then we'll go into all that Harold's House is.
Well, I did start at Lufkin Daily News as a reporter, and I was the city editor there, and then I was a chaplain in hospice, and Laura Squires actually recruited me to come to Harold's House. They were looking for someone to build this position of community education director, and she tapped me to do that, and I was just so excited to enter into the world of child advocacy.
Yeah, that's great. Well, tell it for those that are not familiar with Harold's House, what is Harold's House? Let's start there.
Harold's House is a children's advocacy center, a nonprofit agency, one of about 70 across the state of Texas. We serve 3 counties now, Angelina, Nacogdoches, and Sabine. We started out serving just Angelina County. Some people may know us originally as the Angelina Alliance for Children, which is what our first name was. But then we changed our name to Harold's House, and Harold, a lot of people want to know, who is that? When children come to the center and we say, we're Harold's House, they think it's some guy's house that we're at. But Harold was Lieutenant Harold Cottle, was a Lufkin Police Department officer, and he was one of the people who was instrumental in bringing the center to Lufkin. And so they named it after him. A lot of people may be familiar with his widow, Ruby Cottle, or his daughter, Heather, who was the director over at the Family Crisis Center for a number of years. His entire family, they're all so wonderful in giving back to the community.
That's right. And Miss Ruby actually worked for LPD.
Yes.
She took care of all of them and told them where to go and how to go.
Yes.
And then Heather has just been a great advocate for our community in so many different aspects.
Absolutely. And so Children's Advocacy Center, we serve children who may be going through physical or sexual abuse or neglect, or they may have witnessed a major crime like domestic violence or a murder. So some serious things happening when they come through our doors, but we try to make the experience as good as possible. Before our centers were around, when a child made an outcry of abuse, they'd have to go to a lot of different places. They may have to go to the hospital and tell their story. They may have to tell their story to a school counselor, maybe to someone at the police department or down at the courthouse. And we know that that's traumatic for them to go through that story that many times. And so the mission of a Children's Advocacy Center is to lessen the trauma of children who are going through these difficult experiences. So we try to bring as many services under one roof as possible. So now they come and they receive a forensic interview, they can receive a forensic medical exam, they get advocacy services. We can go to court and do court accompaniment when they go through the court procedure, so they don't have as much trauma. We actually have a room. A lot of people don't know this. We have a room up on the 3rd floor of the courthouse that the courthouse was kind enough to let us remake. We got a grant one year and we made it over to be child friendly. And so the children and their families can wait in that room and play and have a good time and not worry about encountering their abuser in the hallways while they're waiting to go into court. And so those are some of the things that we do. We do family advocacy in the community. I go out and teach in schools and to children to teach them about body safety. And we do know, we have seen cases where children have said, I knew that this wasn't right because of something that I learned in school. And that's an affirmation. We wish that they never had to go through that at all, but we like that they're empowered with information on how to reach out. And we do teach adults as well. So if anyone has an organization where they would like their adults to be educated on how to recognize child abuse and how to respond to it, we can come out and do that for them at no cost.
Nice.
I want to go back to what you said about how traumatic it is for these children to tell the story and then have to tell it over and over again and relive that. So is that essentially that they can come to you and just have to tell that story one time? Is that kind of how that works, or as few times as possible, and then you as an organization are able to kind of advocate on their behalf? Is that how that works?
Yes, absolutely. That is how it works. They come and tell their story once, maybe twice. Just, we don't force them to talk. We just invite them into that open-ended, non-leading space. And I neglected to say that they're sitting with that forensic interviewer, and in another room, law enforcement, CPS, the district attorney's office, or others are observing by remote camera.
Interesting.
So the child doesn't have all of these people around them. They just have one person dressed in regular street clothes.
Sure.
Some children might be intimidated by name tags, badges, a gun, something like that. And so they're just sitting with someone, talking to them, just having a relaxed conversation, inviting them to open up and tell their story. And a lot of children, you can see kind of the relief on their face. Somebody is here to listen to me and to hear what I have to say. And they usually only have to tell that story once, and then we refer them, if necessary, for counseling where they can talk about it in a therapeutic setting.
Sure. I am familiar with Harold's House, but I didn't ever realize that was an aspect of it. I can only imagine how difficult that would be for these children to have to continue to tell that story and then relive the trauma of that every single time. What a huge asset that is to help these kids out. I had no idea.
Yes, and in a space that's non-institutional. That's our goal, is to have it comfortable for them.
It's a darling room. There's paint from the last time I remember. It was very comfortable being in there.
Sure.
Yes, the family rooms where they wait for services are just like someone's living room, and they can play in there. It's not like sitting in a hospital ER, which is very necessary, and we have wonderful ERs here. But they're not really child friendly, and so they can receive they can receive services. We have a clinic at our Lufkin office and our Nacogdoches office. A lot of people don't know that where they receive forensic medical exams, and it's a much more private, much more comfortable interview for them. A lot of people think that might be a traumatic experience, but our nurses are so wonderful to make the children comfortable, to make them have a good conversation. A lot of children have questions about, is my body still okay? Am I going to be all right? What does this mean for me? And our nurses are able to answer all of their questions and give them reassurance. And I remember in particular one year a child who was leaving the center who said, "Oh, can I come back tomorrow?" And so I knew in my heart that he had had a good experience. That's great. As terrible as the things we talk about, that we can bring something good into it. We like to say that we can't change what happened, but we can make every day better.
That's right.
After that. And so that's where our focus really lies.
What age, Ashley, do y'all work with on the kids?
We see 0 through 17.
Okay.
If you're 18 and older, we do see them for forensic medical exams. A lot of people don't know that we do see adults for forensic medical exams, but the difference would be that you have an advocate who comes over from the Family Crisis Center to be with you instead of one of our child advocates. Okay.
Well, it's just always the numbers. The Saving Jane project that I was honored to be a part of, and to read Jane Doe or John Doe and then their age. It's as a mama, having to read that and to read 17 days.
Yes.
Or to read 3 years old, or to have a 9-year-old and to say that, and to know that somebody has hurt a child. It's a very eye-opening experience, and one that I'm always honored to be a part of, but it's one that you just stand there and you get so mad. You think, what can I do to help save these children from being exposed to this and having to go through this the rest of their life,
Yes.
So if you've never been a part of Saving Jane, pay attention to one that comes up every spring, because it is eye-opening, the amount of children in our area that are abused year after year.
Yes, and that's part of our April campaign for National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And we would love for anyone who'd be interested to come and read names to be a part of that. It's makes such a difference, I think, in awareness, raising awareness, and we appreciate everyone who's a part of it.
So tell us, what are the latest statistics for our area?
Well, we know that overall about 1 in 10 children go through child sexual abuse before the age of 18.
Is that specific to our area, or is that
No, that's
nationwide?
an overall statistic.
Okay.
That actually is a slight improvement from years past, where some places may still hear them say 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, but this is a little downturn in it. And we think it's just because people are less afraid to talk about it than we used to be years ago, where we would kind of sweep it under the rug or put it behind a door and not speak of it. But now we're getting out there and doing more education, and the schools are doing more education, and the state is really requiring more conversations. And so the more we can get into those schools, the better. Because some children may never hear the safety message at home.
That's right. What age do you go and talk to the kids at the schools?
I'll do any age. If
Okay.
they're in school, I'll talk to them. So I've taught from preschool, which is kind of difficult because they're, moving
Yeah.
around a whole lot, but we keep it really
Sure.
simple. Kindergarten, all the way through elementary, middle school, and high school. Those older conversations also include online safety and human trafficking, some of the more complicated issues that children are facing today.
Yeah. That's one thing that we deal with all the time. I mean, Annalie likes to play online and things like that. And, she has no concept of the bad people out there. And,
Right.
Brent and I are always saying, well, you can't get on that website and you can't do this. And, well, why? And it's so hard to say, because there are really bad people that want to hurt you.
Right.
It's such a hard conversation to have. So we have a 9-year-old and a almost 7-year-old. And it's hard because you don't want to, and I'm sure these are conversations you guys have all the time, but we don't want to tell them about these potentially bad things, because we almost, as a parent, you don't want to show them that those things exist in the world.
Right.
And we did a mental health awareness month here last month or a month before, and we talked about that a lot with some of the mental health providers when they talked about suicide and how difficult that was. And this, I think, is a similar thing. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. I've probably been more quiet the first 12 minutes of this podcast than I ever have been on an episode, because it's an uncomfortable situation for us to talk about. But to raise awareness about that, you have to, right? And that's so difficult, because as parents, we don't want them to know that these
wanna
things
shelter them.
exist in the world, right? But at the same time, we need them to be prepared, so that they know that it exists. And I think that's probably a big challenge that you face there with that,
Yes.
balancing that, right? How do we let you know that, there is this terrible thing out in the world, but at the same time, how can we prepare you to protect yourself from it?
Right, absolutely. And there's that preparation. I look on it as empowerment, as putting some tools in their toolbox. Keep it on the positive side as you have that conversation of making sure that you are always aware and available to them. I think, the better communication we have with our children, the more likely they are to come and talk to us when they see something concerning. And just overall as a family, it's healthier if they feel safe. I like to call it making the safe space for children. Say if you ever, need to talk about anything, I'm here for you. That day-to-day connection that we build, that emotional connection, is so important for children to feel like they can come and talk to us if something happens. One of the most difficult statistics that we talk about is actually the one that says that 90% of the time or more, the abuser is somebody the child already knows.
Right.
And that's one that I think is most difficult for families to realize and talk
infuriating.
about.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been at the center for 10 years now, and I can only think of a couple of cases that were stranger cases.
Oh my gosh.
They are just so remote and so rare. They do happen. Stranger danger is an important thing to teach our children. When I go into schools, they all know that rhyme, stranger danger.
Right.
So I know parents are talking about it, but we're not talking as much about how the safety rules apply to everyone, everyone in the family. No one should be allowed to touch you in a way that makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable or hurts you or scares you. No one should be allowed to do that, even if you know them, even if you love them. And we do have to be careful to talk about, the abusers. It may be someone they love. It may be someone they care for. And so I don't like to portray it as a big, bad, scary monster, but somebody who may be someone that I care about, and don't let me worry about that as a parent. Let me worry about that conversation. I kind of lost myself there for just a minute.
Yeah, that's the hard part about this
yeah.
is that for so many children, the people who are supposed to be creating this safe space are a lot of times the abusers in that situation, and that's particularly difficult when you're talking about prevention and awareness and things like that. And that feels like just almost an impossible situation. Like I feel for you so much in that trying to create solutions for that is I can imagine very difficult.
Yes, we're dealing with hurting families at the same time as we're dealing with hurting children, and so that's an important thing to remember.
Well, what do you want most parents to know about child safety? What can we as parents teach our children?
Well, one thing is that one of the most important things to know is that child sexual abuse, and we're talking about this kind of abuse the most. I want to be sure to say that, because that is what we see most frequently. We do cover other types of abuse, but most often we see child sexual abuse. And it's important to know that virtually all the time this kind of abuse happens in one-on-one situations where there's one adult and one child, or one teenager or one bigger kid and one child. And so the more we can cut down on those situations in our child's life, we can drastically reduce the opportunities for this type of abuse to occur. So an example would be like if you are taking your child to someone's house for a music lesson, you don't just drop them off there for that hour. You stay there for that music lesson. Mm-hmm. You make sure they're not the last one to be picked up and they're alone with a coach or they're alone with that youth director. We hate to have to think like this, but this is really where these opportunities for abuse do happen. And people say, what about babysitting? Because, I was a babysitter when I was a teenager, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. And there are just wonderful, loving people out here in our community who are sitters. But I think parents can have a conversation with them, say, hey, just to let you know, I've been having some body safety conversations with my child. So if you hear them talking about that, good touch, bad touch, and just to let you know that's what we're doing. We're doing some education with them on safety. And that's just a way to put a babysitter on notice that my child knows some things.
Interesting.
They're educated, and they would speak up if something happened. And it's a non-threatening way because, we have these good relationships with our caregivers, and we don't want to frighten them, but we do want to let them know that we're teaching our children. And we should be talking to our children about this, teaching them the right words for their body parts, teaching them what is a good touch and what is a bad touch.
That's a great tip. I think that's a really good
one I've never even thought about.
I haven't either. That seems really smart. Do you have any other helpful tips or advice that you can give to parents that?
Well, I think just trying to keep that good connection to them, being, the stronger your communication is, the better it's going to pay off in all areas, including the areas of safety. Mm-hmm. And so I like to encourage parents to be open with their children, be a welcoming, comfortable space for them, be a safe space for them. And encourage them. If your school is having a safety presentation, do sign off on letting them go to those presentations. Those are for their benefit, and you never know when they might need it or when they can help a friend.
Sure.
It might not be about them, but it may be about someone. Virtually all of us know somebody that this has happened to, or we've heard about it, and this is just a way to lessen that. I think the more we can fight that in our community, the better.
We touched on digital safety just a minute ago. What are some tips that you can pass on to us, to be able to help with digital safety?
We definitely want to be having conversations with children about not giving your personal information out online. Don't give your name, don't give where you live, where you go to school, what team you're on, any of those conversations. Also telling them not to give pictures or video. That is what predators will often ask for, and it may start very innocently, but then it progresses to something darker. And we do have children in our community right here that have been victims of online solicitation, and even, people asking them to come and meet them. And to do things to them, and that has happened in our community. And I've known children as young as 10 who've been solicited. So we know that most children online have received some sort of online solicitation or have seen something uncomfortable. They don't always mention it to us, but we want them to say, talk to me about this, and learn to block them, show that to mom, show that to dad, let us know. And we should be checking their chats. We should be looking at, and don't forget gaming, because there's chats and gaming as well.
Sure.
But, we should know their passcodes. We should be looking at their chats. It's not an invasion of privacy. I see it as just really making sure they're safe. It's just like going in the room and poking your head in the door and saying, are you okay? You doing all right?
Yeah.
We want to see if there's anything concerning in there that maybe the children don't recognize, but we would recognize as something concerning.
So having seen in the experience that you've had there at the Harold's house, this is me selfishly asking as a parent of a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old who are, you can't avoid them just being online. Like in a perfect world, I would say, hey, you can just never have access to the internet and you're never going to get a cell phone and you're never going to drive. But that's just not realistic to the world that we live in. So we're approaching the age quickly with our kids at the age they're in now that cell phones are now in the conversations. And what age do you typically see that's I wish there's probably what's the safe age to give a kid a cell phone or that kind of thing? I'm sure there's not a perfect answer to that, but
no.
In your guys' experience, never when you're 18, you can have a cell phone after you're married.
Yeah.
What is is there a best practice on that, or any tips that you guys have on that?
Well, I'm kind of old school, and we waited till our kids were up into middle school,
Sure.
till they were taking those long trips away on the bus where they needed to communicate with us. And so I think the longer you can put it off, the better.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have one when they're younger that they can maybe play on, that's yours, that you have your parental settings set as high as possible. Maybe even for the young children, have devices that aren't connected to the internet.
Sure.
You connect it, you download the game you want them to play or the educational material you want them to use, and then you disconnect it. So there's no way they can be in a game. I remember years ago, there was a rule in our house when my kids were young. I have 2 children. My daughter was playing on a game that was a Club Penguin, they called it. It was a Disney game.
I remember all that happening.
And one of the rules was that you can't chat with somebody.
Right.
And I walked in there and there was a chat happening, and so she got grounded from being on the computer for a period of time because she was chatting, and I didn't even realize there was that capability in a game for children that young.
Yeah.
So being aware of what the capabilities of the games are, if possible. I was listening to some parents talk about Roblox yesterday and how their children had seen some things that were very inappropriate on Roblox. So having conversations with children about when you see something that's scary, when you see something that's not okay, this is the time to get away from that and come and talk to me about it. Let me help you find the safe spaces.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a scary world to give your kids
is.
access to the entire internet, in their pocket. A cool tip something that we're looking into that some friends of ours have done is, so we're in that age now. So we have a 9-year-old and he's out and, at golf tournaments and traveling and doing school things now. And we still want to communicate with him. And I joke with Amber, my wife, all the time. I was like, God, I wish I could just text him and tell him something, or text him send her a funny picture of an animal that I saw. We have a lot of friends who are using the Apple Watches now. So you can call with them, you can call to them, and you can text, you can set who can call, but they can't browse the internet, they can't do anything else like that. And that's an interesting way that we've seen some other parents be successfully communicate with their kids without literally handing over the entire internet to your kid with a still developing brain. It's just, that seems insane to me.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And we do, we're so used to being able to communicate immediately with each other.
Yeah.
And I can see that comfort level for parents of young children. So I think that's a great solution.
Yeah, that's something we've seen that any parents out there may consider that. So it's a cool way to
Well, Ashley, thank you first and foremost, thank you for what you do for our children and for our community. It is definitely a labor of love and a passion that you have to do this day in and day out. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for having me. I do want to make sure and mention that our Purse Bingo is coming up November 16th.
Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is one of our
Always
major fundraisers of the year.
Such a fun night.
Yes.
Such a fun night, and it's a great way to support the center. So tickets will go on sale in mid-September. So if you'll just keep an eye out on our Facebook page for updates, we'll have the most
Don't
recent
wait.
information.
They let
Yes.
sell in 3 minutes. It's
Yes.
Yes.
So
the
fast.
insane thing I've ever seen in my
Oh.
life.
Don't wait. That's right.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Oh, where, if people need resources, if I don't think we have a high number of children that listen to the podcast, but if someone needs to utilize your resources, how do they go about doing that?
Well, they can call us at 634-1999. My email is acook@heraldshouse.org, or they can just Google us or they can come to our website, heraldshouse.org. We're happy to talk to people. You know, if someone has an experience and they're just not sure if that's something they need to report, they can have a conversation with us and we can advise them. We do have people call us from time to time about that.
That's great.
Or if they want us to come and give some safety information to children in their organization or adults, we're happy to do that, and that's free of charge.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you again so much for what you do. It's definitely a labor of love, like you said. And we appreciate that the Herald's House is there and this is a resource for our community. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for listening. Please support this community. Please support this resource. Support Herald's House. Go buy all the purses. Do all the things. Help out any way you can. And thank you so much for listening to the podcast again this week. We'll see you next week.